Good luck.
La emisión está comenzando. Todos los asistentes están en modo de solo escucha.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to greet you and to welcome you on behalf of the NBSAP Forum to this third webinar of the Introduction to Resilience for Development MOOC, offered by the United Nations Development Program. My name is Marcela Torres, and I'm a consultant on sustainable development and green economy. I will be your facilitator throughout the entire course. We are grateful for your participation in this third webinar, titled Using Participatory Mapping for Resilience Assessments, Implications for Transformative Change, which will be presented by Dr. Miljan Belay. Dr. Miljan Belay is a researcher at the Stockholm Center, and he's part of the research team under the GRADE program, which stands for Guidance for Resilience in the Anthropocene, Investments for Development, focusing on using participatory methodologies for social learning and change. He is the founder and director of Melka Ethiopia, an indigenous NGO working on agroecology, intergenerational learning, forest conservation, and improving the livelihood of local communities and indigenous peoples. Dr. Belay is also part of the international panel of experts on the sustainability of food. He holds a PhD in education from Rhodes University in South Africa, a Master of Science in Tourism and Conservation from the University of Kent, and a Bachelor of Science in Biology from Addis Ababa University. In this webinar, Dr. Miljan Belay will explain how participatory methodologies offer a powerful means to explore the social, cultural, and ecological history of local communities. He will also discuss how participatory mapping can be used for resilience assessments to negotiate and develop the knowledge base of communities, thereby providing an opportunity for social ecological change. Well, welcome, Dr. Miljan Belay, and thank you for accepting this invitation. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks a lot. Hello, everybody.
Thank you. Before we begin, I would like to remind all of you of some rules and dynamics in the NBSAP Forum webinar sessions. Microphones will be muted during the presentation. This reduces interferences and facilitates communication. We will have a 30-minute presentation followed by 30 minutes of questions and answers. Please send us in advance your questions or raise your hand in the control panel of GoToWebinar. If you want to speak and the connection allows it, I will open your microphones during the Q&A session. This session is being recorded and it will be available on the NBSAP Forum website, www.nbsapforum.net. All participants will receive an email with a link to watch it, as well as a PDF copy of the presentation and a list of resources related to the topic. Now I will transfer the webinar to Dr. Belay. We hope you enjoy this session.
Thank you very much. As you can see from the screen, I work at the Stockholm Resilience Center. I'm also the coordinator of the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, and I'm a member of IPES Food. What I'm going to do is I will briefly explain what resilience assessment and the purpose is, and after that I will briefly talk about the participatory mapping methodologies that we have used for resilience assessment, and after that I will go a little bit deeply in a case in Ethiopia where we have used participatory mapping in resilience assessment techniques to do resilience assessment, and after that to propose solutions. As you can see from the screen, the purpose of a resilience assessment is to identify, implement, and learn from a minimum set of interventions that influence critical dynamics within the system in order for the system to adapt or transform towards more desirable trajectories in the face of known and unknown drivers and shocks. Well, I will not go spend a lot of time on explaining this one, but the most important element of this purpose is to identification, implementation, and learning and also it talks about the whole system in general. It's not about part of the system, but the whole system. So what is it? What is a resilience assessment? You engage with people within a particular system to develop sufficient understanding of the system dynamics, to identify key intervention points or leverage points, and design actions to influence those leverage points. These are the kind of the processes. So in practice, it involves gathering, this is from stakeholders and technical resources, organizing and synthesizing information to allow greater insight into how a system is structured and how it functions. So these are the phases of a resilience assessment. You start by describing, there is a preparatory phase, and after that you describe the system, then you analyze the system dynamics, then you design interventions and design implementation process, then you implement and you learn. So it doesn't remain at an assessment phase. It continues till the implementation, and after that the learning part is a very critical part of resilience assessment. Well, let me talk about the specific case that I talked about. The case is Telecho. Telecho is located in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is divided into 9 regions and 2 satellite cities. One of these 9 regions is called Oromia, and one of the zones in the Oromia is called Welmara, and the Telecho Kabale is located in the Welmara. It's very near to the capital city of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, for those of you who know Ethiopia. So basically, these are in broad way the kind of participatory mapping activities that we did with the local community. The first photo shows community meetings. It's very critical that before you do any kind of mapping, you explain what you are going to do, because you have to get the understanding and the permission of the bigger community before you do the mapping. You cannot do mapping with everybody in the community. We have to do it with a limited number of people, as you can see from the photo. So for that, the bigger community has to identify those people who are going to do a mapping with you, and they have to give you. So this one talks about, shows mapping, the meeting, and the next photo is a mapping event. They haven't started mapping. They are actually looking at the rivers and the roads, which they would populate in the near future. And the photo, one of the photos on the left side, is the participatory 3-dimensional event. And it's a different kind of mapping. On the right side is a finished participatory 3-dimensional model. The maps that I have showed you are spatial, meaning they show the spaces. But local environment is also temporal, meaning if you go to the same area year after year, at a different time in a year, different seasons, it differs. So to capture that seasonality of a landscape, you do ecocultural maps. You see, if you look at one of the triangles, it starts with the name of the season. It talks about the nature, what happens in the natural environment, and then it goes about the livelihood activities. Then it goes about the cultural activity. So in each of the seasons are studied in detail. And as you can see, the season is not divided into 4, as is most of the cases. It's divided into 5, and the size of each of the season is not equal. This is a local people's conception of a season. So in resilience assessment, if you want to understand the ecological change that is going to happen in a year, and the social or cultural response to that social ecological change, you have to do also this ecocultural mapping. And as you can see, These are two maps. On the left side is map of the past, some 40, 50 years ago. And on the right side is map of the present. You can, on the same area, you can see huge difference between the past and the present. This is to, maps are basically points for discussion. This is to analyze the trend of change and what has changed in the ecosystem and how the culture of the people or the response or the social and the cultural response of the people have changed over time. So they help you to do that. In some cases, like in the case of the Shaka, we do also participatory GIS. This basically means you train local people on the use of geographical position system or GPS, and they go in the forest and they take points which are very critical for them, cultural points. And you come in, you populate the map. But in general, what I wanted to tell you is the maps are not the end result. It's the maps are basically for discussion, for talking, and you bring the local community to talk about the maps, and that generates a lot of discussions, a lot of interesting insights. So what has happened in Telecho? We did this mapping between the 6th and 10th of October 2015. Malka Ethiopia, actually, the institution that I was a director of some months ago, has hosted and facilitated this event. It is very critical that we did it with Malka because this institution is trusted by the community. So trust is very critical during resilience assessment with local community. Otherwise, it's very difficult to really generate the kind of discussion that you hope for, and also the kind of responses that you want to get from the local community. So in our resilience assessment, we had the local community, we had teachers from around that area, and also people have come from different parts of the country, from Gambela, Oromia, Amhara, they've come. And also we had some government people or government staff from the whole Mara Woreda. So people have, a range of people have come to do the resilience assessment. This is quite important because the more people you have, the more insight you get. And on the last day of the meeting, especially when we're discussing about the future, then we invited the administrator and the vice administrator. The vice administrator is the head of the Agricultural Bureau. So it's very critical that the critical stakeholders have participated in the resilience assessment. So the first question that we have asked is resilience of what? We have looked at the livelihoods. The livelihoods, it's an agricultural community basically. They keep livestock. And unfortunately, as you can see from the picture in background, they plant eucalyptus. I'll come to that as about the impact of eucalyptus later. And some livelihood activities like beekeeping, stone extraction, and petty shops. They have small shops. In terms of infrastructure, they have one dry weather road. It's very difficult to get landlines there. There is no landline. But now, almost everybody in the community has mobile phones. I think this resilience assessment has happened in 2005, but I went quite recently to this community and everybody has mobile phones. As we will see later on, this increases connectivity. And what is the implication of that connectivity? We'll discuss a little bit on. Limited source of tap water, limited access to healthcare and veterinary, and they have an irrigation channel. What are the ecological variables of the system in Telecho? There are patches of indigenous forests, mainly junipers, interspersed by eucalyptus plantation. Eucalyptus plantation is spreading very much. There is a wetland called Barga, the southern side of the Kabale. This is a very, very critical wetland because the local community uses it for grazing. It has also have come into some political issue, because the government has started, the local government has started to give this land to use, to sell and use it, and the local community are having reduced access to this wetland. Because of that, they have to pull their cattle to the community, and the cattle who are not going to the wetland are exerting a lot of pressure already on an overgrazed land. So change in one system affecting another one. Diverse seeds, they have diverse seeds. I think there are over 15 varieties of barley, close to 5 varieties of wheat, but this variety or diversity is decreasing, as we will see later on. And there is a big river, the Mintile River, and also some streams in there. They are drying, and rich soil but rapidly eroding. We will come to this point later, and limited wildlife. So stakeholders, as I said, have participated, the government and the local community, and mainly the Malkaituba. You have to involve the government. In our case, the government has a huge hand in governing both the social and ecological life of the farmers, so they have to be included. So the other thing that we have looked is the cultural side of this community. This is very critical. I see as a shortage in many resilience assessments that are happening all over the world these days, is a shortage in this area, in understanding the culture of the local community. So in that case, in terms of religion, we have Christianity. The community totally is Christian, and two competing kind of Christianity, the Orthodox in the older Christianity and the Protestant Christianity, and the community are divided along these two religious denominations, and there's a little bit of tension because of that. But there is some level of traditional spirituality, but that's reducing a lot. Or in terms of social governance, there are religious associations in Ethiopia, and each day is assigned to a saint. So sometimes on this, some of the days, the local community do not work, but they come together every month at a household level, and that is its way of governance. The Wamfal and Dabo are these traditional governance structures around helping each other with work during mostly harvest time. So they come through these structures to help each other. There is another kind of social structure where people come together when somebody dies to help each other. A co-op is they contribute some amount of money every month, and 1 month somebody gets it, another month another person gets it. It's a very traditional way of insurance. Saving and Credit Association, this is a new thing, and the Community Seed Bank Association is another community governance system. And there is government. The government has its own structures up to the household level, which takes in a lot of time with them to describe. So this is a governance structure. What we have to do is, let's not only look for problems. When people do resilience assessment, they go to look for problems and discuss on solutions. But we have to discuss also what assets that people have. So the existence of cultural associations or governance system that I have talked, culture of saving, availability of diverse seeds, diverse agricultural knowledge, practice of soil and water conservation, mobility. By mobility means some members of the community actually, when it's not harvest time, when there is shortage of food and money, they go out and work somewhere else and bring money with them, and that's good. Water saving strategy, diverse food, strong cultural governance, moral values. This is very, very critical, by the way. When people talk about sustainable development goals now, I think what is emphasized now is that I think we need to bring this element in, values. Practice of protecting cultural areas. These are the key assets in the community. So another question is resilience to what? What's the problem? The El Nino cycle bringing drought. I think previously it was every 10 years. Now I think it's occurring much repeatedly. The 10-year gap is narrowing, so this is coming quite frequently. Water shortage is part of the problem. Soil degradation, I think we'll go into a little bit of detail. Overgrazing is also a problem. Deforestation, that area, that land was forested some not so far, 30 years ago, and there was a government change, and in the space of 3-4 years, rapid overgrazing, and everybody competing to deforest because it has become suddenly a source. That's a different story that I don't intend to go into. And animal and crop disease, frost is a huge problem. Spread of eucalyptus plantation. I think between the gap, even after when we did our resilience assessment and now, it's a huge spread of eucalyptus plantation. People are converting their agricultural land into eucalyptus, and you can imagine the kind of social and ecological upheaval that may create at some point. Illegal construction of houses and population increase. It's exploding. The population is exploding. Fortunately, though, some of the youth go out to nearby towns after they are educated. Sometimes it's bad when the youth leave farming areas, but sometimes it's good also. Otherwise, a household would be on each other's throats if everybody stays at home. Key assets. I think we have gone through this one. Sorry. So after we have done resilience of what to what, then we analyze the system dynamics. And we analyze it in two ways. One way is what's called the specified resilience, and the other is a general resilience. I will come to the specified, the general resilience part later. But what is specified resilience? Resilience deals with the resilience of what to what. It's very specific. You choose one component of the system and focus on that. The resilience of crop production to drought. This is one component of the resilience, the total resilience of the system. Specific resilience involves attempting to understand and identify the controlling, often slowly changing variables that are likely to have threshold effects leading to unwanted and perhaps irreversible regime shifts. In our case, the local community have identified soil degradation as a specified resilience. Soil degrades very slowly. It is a slow variable. You don't even notice when it degrades, but at some point, it can reach at a point of no return to regime shift, as you know. So you can analyze using these components, the biophysical, the social, and the economic. Degradation of forests, and the biophysical. When the forest degrades, it has an impact on the soil. These are the slow variables, Spread of gullies, abandoning the practice of fallowing. Fallowing is for those of you, farmers leave their land for a year after they have farmed it, so that it recovers. The land recovery is called a fallow. So farming highly sensitive and slopy areas. Social, increase in population. Then you go and farm areas which are not suitable for farming. Decline in respect for local governance, and refusal by some to do so in conservation. And economic, in the increasing the price of crops and the cost of crops increases, then you tend to farm more, increase utilization of farm inputs, especially chemical fertilizer, production of cash crops, and availability of credit service. So that's a specified resilience. General resilience analyzes the system as a whole. You go and ask questions to analyze the system In our case, it's a talaj or qabali. That's a boundary of the system. So you ask about that system. Then you ask the diversity in crops, the diversity in plants, the diversity in cultural practices, in governance mechanisms, all this. Then the reserve, meaning, if you have a patch of forest somewhere, for example, that's a reserve. Seeds from that forest can help you recover other areas. Or memory in older people is also reserved. Slow variables, as a soil erosion. Openness is a community open for new ideas. That's very much important. Connectivity, meaning how much the area is connected to each other, the ecological connectivity, or also how much the people are connected. It's good sometimes, but when there's a lot of connectivity, for example, in the case of social issues, if a disease starts somewhere, then it wipes out the whole of community. This kind of community connectivity. So tightness of feedback, I think the best example for me is previously people don't have a cell phone. Now they can ask the price of a quintal of F, and quickly they can quickly get the response from the market. But previously they don't know. Transformability is a capability for transformation. So the last question will be a so what questions. After you have done all your assessments, you're specified in general, then so what? So we have involved the government officials, as I say, and community members and the trainees to ask the question, so what? Again, when you answer this so what question, before you develop any kind of objectives and plans and whatever, you have to look at the attributes, the positive attributes in the community. Yeah, I think that's where I see most of my colleagues missing. And what are the attributes inside the community that help you to be resilient? That's a question. Working ethic, diversity in crops, still soil is fertile, practice of saving crops, the bylaws in the community, it's very critical. Availability of natural resources, willingness to accept new ideas in practice. It's about openness, existence of structure for information flow, it's mobile phone, willingness to ability the ecosystem, the availability of remnant, forest is what I called, I talked about reserves, the introduction of irrigation structure, availability of health services. These are all good, things to be improved for increasing the adaptation of the community. Yeah, so we've looked also at the opportunity that's existing in terms of the local governance structure willing to participate in the changing that the community, the acceptance of the community, all this. But we have looked at also problems, things to be improved for increasing the adaptation of the community. This has to be the list here shows, the things that have to be improved. Improper or unplanned land use, that has to be, farming what should not be farmed, planting eucalyptus, uncontrolled grazing. This has to change. Forest degradation, equality of women, not yet progressed. I think this is pathetic in that area, I must say. Not using of water bodies for irrigation. A practice of partying even in the seasons of low income. This is, weddings, these religious festivals, lack of law enforcement, shortage of infrastructure. It should change. Willingness to accept ideas, but not equally motivated to practice. Shortage of diversified source of income, lack of capacity, development trainings to artisans in the community, erosion of culture, for example, traditional health practices, and shortage of usage of natural fertilizers. The people are going to chemical fertilizers. These are the opportunities that I mentioned. There is a National Agriculture Research Center there, a technical vocational training center is there, extension service is there, employment opportunity is there, land use plan is there, and external NGOs are there. All of these are opportunities that these local communities use. So using those opportunities that are available, then you go into identifying the goal of the system. What is the goal of the system? With local communities. what they said was to improve the resilience of the ecosystem services, including food production and rural livelihoods. These are the goals that are basically identified after the assessment. So, what are the strategies in the typical activities that are identified? The first one was implementing integrated participatory watershed management approach, soil conservation, afforestation, fodder, apiculture, animal fattening, road, school, improving the practice of saving, grinding meals. All these are part of the integrated participatory watershed management approach. That's what they said. Second was repeating engagement with the community, awareness raising. They said, after even a decision is made, there is always a struggle in the community, whether to bring some community members on board. So for this, awareness raising is important. Agroecology, they said, is important. Animal, natural fertilizer, farmers' knowledge should be used. But it doesn't mean that, other techniques are not, appreciated. The other specific targets is promote intergenerational learning. This is because, we've talked about the presence of very, very good cultural practices in the community, which could be useful, and the local community has also the diversity in seeds, and some of the traditional herbalists also have knowledge. All there is this knowledge, but there is a coming generation is not doesn't know this knowledge. I think this is a problem all over Africa and in other countries also. So there is a gap is being created between the knowledge resources of people, the communities, and the new generation, so that the community said that I think our children need to understand what we know, so that life continues and they can go forward through understanding this life. So that's why I promote intergenerational learning. As you can see from the photo, this is one of the activities of Melka where diverse seeds were collected and the students presenting the diverse seeds that they have collected. And also policy activity, advocate for change in policy, improving laws and implementing strong ones. So this advocacy is a very interesting concept here, because it talks about it brings in the other scale, so the change has to happen at the local community level, but change has to happen also at a higher level, at the zone level, at the federal, at the government level. So for that, laws has to change if they have to change, and if there are good laws and policies, they need also to be implemented. For example, they have said that there is a policy which prevents local people from farming on slopy areas, but it's not implemented. So that should be implemented. Thank you. Hello?
Thank you so much, Dr. Belay. This is a really interesting and relevant topic for our NBSAP forum members. I'm sure participants found your presentation valuable for implementing their NBSAPs. I would like to invite participants to share their questions, doubts, and comments, or raise their hands to participate in the Q&A session. Please use the control panel of the GoToWebinar platform. We can open your microphone or read your question depending on your preference. We have a couple of questions that have already come in. Dr. Belay?
Yes.
For example, one person asks, can you please explain more on participatory GIS and its components in detail with examples?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Shall I take one by one? Okay. Participatory GIS actually includes a whole level of GIS techniques. If you take the two-dimensional mapping, even it is a sketch mapping, if you take that into a GIS system. It's called participatory GIS. Participatory three-dimensional modeling is also a GIS. What I've explained is about the local community in the Sheka forest. They have they've been trained in the use of GPS, and instead of a cartographer going and mapping, the local community were given the freedom to go anywhere else on the landscape and take the GPS points of those places. So they took the GPS points of sacred sites. The sacred sites included particular trees and or stone boulder or water points. Or they took, they have asked us to map the bigger honey producing area in the forest, a very big block. So we had to take the GPS points of the area, these kind of things. Yeah. So sorry, I did put a timer. So this is basically what happens when you do participatory GIS. But participatory GIS, generally means it's a PGIS means it hosts about 6 kinds of mapping activities. Any kinds of mapping which you process through GIS is called participatory GIS.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We have another question that's related. Mr. Stephen McCool asks, what was mapped and why, and how did the mapping address resilience?
What was mapped?
And why?
And why?
And how did the mapping address resilience?
I think the mapping is used for assessment, resilience assessment. So using the mapping, we have described, I think, resilience of what? What is going to be resilient? Resilience of what? So in the resilience of what, we have to understand the social, cultural, and ecological history of the landscape. So using these maps, you can do that. For example, you do map of the past. The map some the area some 50, 60, 70 years ago or 40 years ago, as long as they remember, they do put it on the map. And they do map of the present. So and then you ask questions, between the past and the present, what has changed? Why and how? So in this way, it can tell you the kind of change that has happened in the social and ecological and cultural sides. It's a fantastic method to help you analyze the social and ecological conditions of the area. And also, it's also important to understand the dynamics, the dynamic, the assessment of the dynamics of the social ecological system. If you, when you are doing general resilience, you can look at the forest patches when you talk about reserves. You can look about connectivity using what is on the map. You can look about slow variables. You can between map of the past and map of the present, you can look at the extent of soil degradation. So you can see that that's a slow variable that's happening. And also, it is very good for scenario analysis. We do map of the futures, into scenarios. One map of the future is if things continue normal, without any involvement or without any intervention, what is going to happen? And if there is intervention, a positive intervention, what can happen? So that's kind of scenario analysis you can do. Once the positive or the change that they want is there also, you can ask some more questions. Why are you not changing into this positive direction, to this area? What shall you do? And that will translate into an action. The last part of the resilience assessment is identification of trajectories. Where do you want to go? So the paths, you can identify the paths through map of the future. So mapping helps you in many ways.
Thank you, Dr. Belay. We have another question posed by Thomas van Vigen, also related to mapping. It says, mapping social ecological systems seems to be an integrative approach to dealing with landscape level resilience issues. What is the global response to this, and what is the level of success, or is it still in its early days?
The global response, I think, at the globally, mapping is recognized as one of the methodologies. Unfortunately, the participatory GIS is not progressing as the GIS. The GIS is becoming the household in many countries. So GIS is mostly done by experts, sitting in their offices, or probably they can go to the field to do ground level verification or ground truthing, but mostly it's experts. But participatory GIS is also progressing, not as much as expected, but now there is a big group, for example, on participatory GIS globally. There's a community of practice around that. So it's being used, but not as much as expert-based GIS, unfortunately.
Thank you so much. We have two related questions. One was, what was the criteria for the selection of the project site? And another is, can we say at the site of context, the countries are different when we're talking about things to be improved to form resilience?
Countries are different? Sorry?
Yes. In talking about things that need to be improved in order to create resilience.
Yes. I think the selection criteria for the site can be different according to the purpose of the assessment, according to the relationship that you personally, the person or the institution that wants to assess. We have chosen this area. One, it's an area where Malka Ethiopia, the NGO that I was working with, We were working with the local government, with the local community, and the communities are willing. That's a very critical criteria. Logistically, it was very easy also. It's very close to the capital city. It does not mean that we didn't do this in other inaccessible areas. I think we did it in accessible areas, but it required a lot of resource to do it there. And another critical factor that I say is trust between the local community and the other actors, especially the facilitating civil society organization. So these are the selection criteria for the place. I think maps are very specific, even in our context in Ethiopia. It's one country, but we did it. I think around 8 communities in Ethiopia, and all I would say are totally different. There's one agropastoral community, in a forest community, even agricultural communities have different histories, different cultural setups. And I was fortunate also enough to do this in other 6 African countries. And also I've seen mapping in Colombia also. That's where I learned some of my techniques from Colombia, from the indigenous peoples of Colombia. So everywhere you do it, it is quite different. And sometimes when you do it again also somehow, it can be different. It all depends on the kind of people that you involve in the kind of question that you ask. So it's a never-ending, continuous and an iterative process, and it's different from context to context.
Thank you so much. We have several questions dealing with stakeholders.
Okay, good. Good.
Oh, people are
Good.
very active today, so we're going
No,
to
I love
be
it.
very
I love it.
grateful if you answer as
No,
many
I will. I
questions
will.
as
I will.
possible.
I will. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, here I go.
Mm.
Well, some people one person asked, did the resilience group develop the list of things to be improved, or did the facilitator? That was one question.
Uh-huh.
Some other
Okay.
people asked, how do you balance the differences of knowledge levels and also the social forces between the different groups of stakeholders? So
Balance
those
knowledge,
and power levels.
knowledge levels, and the last one is power.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
first, what are the criteria for selecting? No. What is if the resilience group developed the list of things to be improved, or did the facilitator? And later on, how does the facilitator balance the differences of knowledge levels and
Yeah.
power
Yeah.
force between the different groups of
Yeah.
stakeholders?
Yeah. Very good questions. Really good questions. All of them, even the previous ones. I don't know. By the resilience group, he meant the community and
I think
the
so.
people who have participated in the assessment. I think that's what he meant. That's what I suspect. In
I
that
think
case,
so.
yeah, the facilitator cannot, I think, develop this one. It's, I mean, it's the basic principle of any participation, especially community participation, is you give the stick to the community, to the people. It's very critical that you do it. It's very difficult for experts and university or whatever trained people to do it, but it's very, very critical that you give the stick to the people. So it's actually the people. The people develop the list. The people prioritize the list. So it's them. Even I said we did it with teachers and also staff of Malka Ethiopia and the local government. All of them were watching when the communities were doing it. I think it's very critical to ensure that. Balance of knowledge levels, by the way, the most knowledgeable people in this exercise are the people themselves, the local community. Nobody knows their history, nobody knows their environment, nobody knows the association among the components of the environment, as people do. I think anybody who has done participatory processes with the local community would attest that. So they are the knowledge holders, more than the teachers, more than the staff of the NGO, and also more than the government. And what the best thing about mapping is it shifts the power from the experts, from in this case the experts are farmers, from the other actors to the people, because they are the ones who know. But I'm not saying that there is no power dynamics in the community itself. There are women, there are youth, and there are community members who are participating. Mostly, the elders do have power. Some elders can be spiritual leaders. For example, in our case, one of them was a spiritual leader, and because of that, he's very much respected. And some of them would be having a relative from the government or whatever. But why I find participatory mapping mostly a balancing method is nobody actually knows. Nobody actually knows in total the history of that landscape. They have to come as a group and piece it together as a mosaic. So they piece together informations and they make it as a mosaic. For that, the participation of everybody is needed. So I have witnessed in so many cases where, especially when the past was mobilized, the people who are from the lower economic strata or the social strata in the community coming to the front because they know it a lot. So yeah, I'm not saying that there are no power relationship within the local community and between the local community and others, but mapping has a very powerful way of dealing with that.
Thank you so much. We have another related question about stakeholders. The question is, how can stakeholders be identified? Are there any guidelines? What happens if the local government does not cooperate?
It's really bad if the local government cannot cooperate. I don't know. In some cases, if you have somebody on top of, hierarchically, at a higher level of government, you can take a paper from that government and from the higher government and take this to the lower level of government. But the best that we do is to actually go to their offices and manage that conflict. Just talk to them. And I've never found a problem up to now where you actually go to the local government and talk to them and explain to them about the purpose of this. So how the people are identified, if you remember, I've shown you a map, part of the slide is where the bigger community members are sitting together and where they are asked to identify people who should participate in this mapping. So our first question is, since we want to mobilize a map, the past, we ask who actually knows about the history of this community. Can you give us 2 or 3 names? They give you. Who actually knows the landscape, the terrain? They argue among themselves and they give you. And women, who do you think are the knowledgeable women in this community? They give you. Obviously, in this discussion, in this giving names, there is a power play, and also some of the community member may not get a chance, but there is always a trade-off, and there is no perfect process. But we do identify that, and we try as much as possible sometimes to do also what do you call it, this looking for people who usually are forgotten, the voice of the people. So for example, we asked the committee to divide themselves into like 3 or 4 categories and give us people who they consider are very poor and who they consider are poor, who they consider are medium, who they consider are rich. Somehow we get a combination of that, but there's no perfect process, and it's all contextual, as the previous question indicated.
Thank you so much. We have lots of questions coming in. People are very interested in this topic.
I'll make short my answers.
No, that's okay. I will open the microphone to Nuha Eltinai. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Hello, Nuha. Something's wrong. She has her hand raised. Okay, well, let's see. Somebody else had their hand up. Mohammed Hamat. Hello. Hi, Mohammed.
Hi, Marcela. Thank you, Billy, for your presentation. Hi.
Yes, hi.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I hear you.
So, thank you so much. Your presentation was really interesting for me.
Thank you.
But my question is related to your presentation. You described the situation very well. I can divide the social ecological system to two subsystems. In one side, we have local community with their natural and social capital, and in another side, the government side or the state side. For me, it was interesting that the local community side do their job well or not bad, but it seems if the issue arises, it is related to the government side. The government side with their law, with their policy development, and so on. When we ask resilient to what is the role of the government side? Thank you very much.
At the lower level, as you said, we have involved the local government. You know, in one of my slides, I said that the administrator, which is a very powerful component of that system, and the vice president were there. You know, the Warada has 23 cabales, you know, these small units. Telecho is one of those 23. So this administrator administers all these 23. So he is at the higher level. But there is another higher level in terms of scale. So at the higher level, the government has policies, strategies. So whatever you do, you decide to do at the local community level, yes, it can be implemented, but it should be supported at the policy level. That's why the last action point that we have identified says policy. So that level has to be, there has to be an advocacy strategy specifically for that, which is very much complicated, which is very much challenging. For example, we need to develop a mechanism to allow the community to do agroecology, but the policy at that level can be in high input agriculture, you know, to increase food production. So there is some level of conflict up there. So yeah, I don't have a very clear answer, but the only thing that I say to you is it's very good to understand what the local level actors want, and it's very critical also to translate that to a higher level policy advocacy initiative.
Thank you so much, Dr. Belay. Let me see if we have another hand raised, and if not, I'll proceed to read other questions that have arrived.
Yep.
Nope. Okay, Asir Udin. Hello, Asir.
Thanks for nice presentation and about the community strategies. I want to know about the Community Seed Bank Association, and as well as the which organization evaluate the telecom community strategies. Can you tell me?
The last bit, what did you say? Community evaluate what?
Yeah.
You asked for a community seed bank and hello?
Sorry?
I didn't get the last bit.
Can you repeat the last part of your question?
Did you understand, Marcela?
Organization evaluate the telecom community activities.
Evaluate the what activity? Did you understand it, Marcela?
It's asking about the smaller community. Is that right?
He said evaluate something. I think evaluate the.
Asir, can you repeat the question and speak closer to the microphone?
What do we evaluate?
Hello, it seems he's having connection problems.
Okay. I think I will continue there. I think I will only answer him about the community seed bank. The community seed bank actually has come out of the mapping process. When we do mapping, the committee said that we had this number of varieties of barley and this number of wheat, and we have lost some. So we have decided to take this community to another community, which we have managed to protect their seeds and start a seed bank system. And we have taken the community there, and they have interacted with the farmers, and they have come back and asked us to support them in building community seed bank. So we built the community seed bank, and there was only one association. There 5 associations were created, and 30% of the association members were women. So they started to collect seeds, and they go seeds also from the community that they have visited, and they start to lend these seeds. They lend the seeds, and after harvest, they receive the seeds with some interest, and they lend also to some more farmers. So that's how they manage the community seed bank. And the community seed bank is part of the seed revival strategy of the whole community system.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We have a very interesting question about gender.
Oh, okay.
It says, the participant says, I noticed the earlier analysis included reference to gender equality, but the suggestion for improvements or possible actions to improve resilience did not have any specific issues or actions identified to address this. How can it be addressed?
Yeah, that's a very, very gender sensitive participant. You noticed it. It's very good that you noticed it. Yes, gender equality is pathetic, as I said, in this community. What has happened now is, as I speak, I think since end of 2015, full 2016, even now in 2017, is a very, very specific program addressing girls in that community, and addressing their educational needs, and also the economic needs of the local community. There are 5 women's groups which were supported, but now they are running by themselves. They are getting also literacy training. So there is a lot of gender revival movement in that community, which is not actually captured by the action points in the document. I totally agree that it was not captured, but in reality, there's a lot of things that are happening after this resilience assessment.
Perfect. We have some other related questions. One participant asks, what is wrong with planting eucalyptus trees in erosion-prone areas? And another one asks, stopping farming in sloping lands, does this solve the community problems associated with their daily livelihood, or do we need to explore other conservatory approach in farming methods?
Farming on slope. Yeah. Eucalyptus, one, it's a monoculture. If the whole landscape is covered by eucalyptus, and if a disease, a particular disease of that eucalyptus comes and is wiped out, it's against resilience. That's one. Second, as you know, little plant grow among the eucalyptus tree. So in terms of diversity, it reduces diversity hugely. Third, everybody understands that they drain the land a lot, especially if you plant them around water bodies. That's what the local community said. The only positive thing about them is that they grow like in 4 or 5 years, and it's a cash crop, So it gives money to them, and that's why they are planting it. But in terms of the ecological and social resilience, it's problematic. And also, they convert agricultural lands into eucalyptus. So it reduces the amount of food available to the local community and then to urban areas also. Farming on slopy areas, I think what they have identified during the specified resilience is soil. So when soil degradation accelerates, at the end of the day, the productivity level will lower down, and also the kinds of crops that they plant also changes. I remember in one community they were planting F, it's a Ethiopian specific plant, a red variety, but it only works when the soil is fertile. So after the soil is washed, then they couldn't even plant that one. So the kind of seeds that they plant also change. So that they find problematic in terms of resilience. And also, slopy areas previously were covered with trees. Now they have to cut those trees. But the question is, then what should they do? The answer is, it is possible to build the soil and increase productivity on the land that they have. And also by applying a number of, now we understand there are close to 20 mechanisms of building your soil, increasing productivity. There are water bodies there, they can bring water, and they can do controlled irrigation, and they can plant even 2 times per year while they were planting only 1 time. So there are methods of increasing productivity and supporting themselves. And also, unfortunately or fortunately, slowly but surely, the small town is creeping on them. So they have market now, they have roads, they have markets, then they can also diversify their income to other kinds of livelihood. So in this way, it is possible to increase income, because more and more planting or farming of slopes would decrease more and more the resilience of the local community. It would lead them into a situation where the north of the country has moved into, which is drought.
Excellent. We have another interesting question submitted by Enathi Hasawa Maria. I hope I pronounced it correctly. The question is, how can participatory resilience mapping be applied in the case of protected areas, where local communities are not allowed to enter those areas or don't have enough information about the ecosystems in those protected areas?
Okay. I don't know. I mean, if this place was a protected area quite a long time ago, I mean 100, 200 years ago, maybe they don't have enough information. But my experience is that if these protected areas have become protected areas in the last 50, 60 years or whatever, and if the local community occasionally move into these areas, they know the place really, really very much. So it is very much difficult for many leaders or management of the protected areas to include local communities in their mapping and the planning activities, but it will be very beneficial for the conservation management, the protected area management, to do mapping with the local community. Then it's quite open, the issues are quite open, the conflicts are quite open, they can sit around those maps, and by pointing at each of the components of the landscape, they can really have a very good discussion. I think mapping is, and it's already used in many places, a fantastic way of creating negotiation and dialogue among actors with quite divergent interests. So I would encourage the questioner to do mapping instead of not mapping.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We have 3 related questions. The first one asks, how much time did it take to complete Telecho's resilience assessment? And then we have another one that asks, how long would a project cycle ideally be from the start to when goals objectives are met? What happens after that? So essentially, we have a couple of people asking about the time frame for this entire process to be completed and what happens after it is.
I think the time frame for this assessment that we used was 5 days. But it all depends on the kind of participatory mapping tool that you use. In case of participatory 3-dimensional modeling, for example, including preparation, thinking, whatever, you know, there are lots of logistical issues to fix. So can take 3 to 6 months, including the mapping event. But for sketch mapping activity, for 2D mapping, I think you can do it safely within 5 days, I would say. The project cycle, if you consider the mapping as a project, as I said, it will be 5 days. But after that, implementation, all of these things, and monitoring and evaluating, and learning from that, and visiting the concepts of the proposal, visiting the vision, the objectives and the outputs and all that. It all depends on the project, on the available resources. But most people do it every year, and there are some people who have a 3-year vision and a 5-year vision. If you have a 3-year period time, then a project cycle is a 3-year. 5 years is a 5 year. It all depends. I don't have a specific answer for this, to be honest.
Thank you so much. We have a couple of related questions that are very interesting. One of them is, to what degree did you, if any, did you use smartphones in your project in Telecho? If so, for what purpose? And the other question is, please explain to us how can we use GIS information in the improvement of culture in indigenous tribes and people?
GIS information?
Yes. For improving culture and in indigenous tribes and peoples. And the first one was if you use smartphones in your project in Telecho.
The first question is very easy. We didn't use.
Okay.
Yeah, that's basically we didn't use. The second one is, I think, if you go back to the evolution of participatory mapping, I think it has evolved as counter mapping and counter GIS. Basically, it's indigenous communities in Canada and in Latin America later who have used it. So it has its origin from basically from indigenous people struggle to own the process of mapping, because mapping is a political process. It was a political process. It was used to subjugate people, to put border around people, to define people, to create narrative about people. All that political connotation was associated with mapping. So later, the people have started to use it for their own purpose. So it has to start coming from the people themselves. That's why it's called counter mapping and later counter GIS. So it is extremely useful for indigenous people, all sorts of mapping, carefully done, because it is very much useful to mobilize the history of that community. It is very much useful to really understand the connectiveness among the parts of the ecosystem. It's very much important to create a narrative, for the bigger local community. They all have a similar history about their landscape, about their social and cultural history. So, and it's so great also to connect the generations. Wherever I go with indigenous people, what they say is that this generation, the present generation, is attracted by formal school, by this and by that, and forgetting their culture. So this methodology is very much useful to connect the two. So yeah, I think I will send you the link later, when this is over, and using that link, you can look at the different mapping methodologies and methods, and based on that, I think you can use it with your community.
Thank you, Million. We have one question that the participant wants to ask via the microphone. I will open up for her.
Yeah.
Hello, Diana.
Hello.
Yes.
Oh, hello, doctor, and hello, everybody. I am really glad to participate in this webinar.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, my question is the next thing. Well, I want to know if you, Dr. Begley, knows about some experience related with specific resilience as a base for establishing new policy in environment in some country or region in the world.
Yeah. I think the resilience science and thinking has developed a lot through the study of the Australian, the researchers, basically in the Brian Walker, and also the Stockholm Resilience Center is in the Swedish research. So the only case that I know is the case with the Australian. I don't remember exactly what the cases are, but yeah, if you go to the Cicero website or the Stockholm Resilience website or the Resilience Association website, you can find some specific cases where specified resilience was used. But quite recently, they were saying that there was a promise of local government at a higher level, using the results of the resilience assessment to change what they are doing. But that, through after 4 or 5 years of assessment, they find that even the government is finding it difficult to do, because mostly it asks you to change what you are doing, to move into a different direction, and that requires the whole system, or the whole government system, to change how they think, how they monitor and evaluate and act, and that takes time. And while that takes time, then things change, on the ground. I'm sure you know about complexity. We live in a very complex world, and things don't happen as we want them to happen. So what you have identified as a problem and as a strategy today may change tomorrow due to social and ecological reasons. So so if you could look at some of the examples, the websites that are given to you, probably you might find, I think probably the work of Brian Walker might have some specific examples. I'm sorry, I don't remember right now.
Okay, thank you so much. We have one last question that I want to ask, because we're reaching our time limit. A participant asks, what is the role of universities to support this resilience project, and are stakeholders receiving any technical support or training in order to apply agricultural practices that minimize deforestation and the use of chemical fertilizers. What is your expectation about land management of grain crops in this mapping project?
Stakeholders getting support.
From
The
universities.
last one is?
What is the role of universities? That was the first one to support this resilient project. And then what is your expectation about the land management of grain crops on this mapping project?
Land management of grain crops.
Yes, if stakeholders are receiving technical support or training to apply agricultural practices that reduce deforestation and the use of chemical fertilizers, for example.
Yeah. Universities have a huge role. I think it would be very much important to do it with universities, because after this is done, I think they can continue that assessment. After some time, they can do the monitoring. They can be part of the learning. But they have to go down from the ivory tower that they are in now, because most university experts and professors think that local community don't know. So they go to teach mostly, not to listen. So they have to go to listen, basically. That's a very important de-learning process, that for learning you have to de-learn to some extent. So, but their role is very, very important, I must say. The stakeholder getting technical support, I think they should get. That this question reminds me of one principle that I would like to share with the participants, which is, if you don't know that you are going to follow up with your resilience assessment at some point, please don't do it. So sometimes people take mapping, they do mapping with the local community. As we have seen, a lot of issues would come, a lot of expectation would be raised, and people, mostly experts, would put their map under their armpit and go. Local communities will see only the back of them. They will never hear from them. So it's very critical that you do it when you know that you can follow it up with technical support through training and other things, and also other practical supports also. It's very much critical that you do that. And land management of crops, I think you need to give also, you need to organize exchange experiences for farmers on how to manage the land. They know how to manage the land, but as we have seen, it's also good to get some experiences from other areas. When we say that the system is resilient, if it is open, we are talking about that. If it is open, then other ideas come into that system, and local communities also benefit from that idea. That's what I'm talking about. I hope I have answered the last question.
Thank you. We have reached our allotted time. Many thanks again to Dr. Belay for your time, and thank you all for your participation in this webinar. I know there are a number of questions that Dr. Belay did not have the time to answer right now, but he has done a great job answering most of them, and we really appreciate that. Dr. Belay, just in case you have any final comments that you would like to share with us, do you have any final remarks on the topic or any recommendations that you would like to share with our participants today?
It's only that I'm so happy that I have got the opportunity to interact with the participants, and they have all asked very great questions. I advise the participants to really go into this resilience understanding as much as possible for them. They have to go deep into it. The Stockholm Resilience Center has a lot of resources for resilience on its website. I think they should visit it and take as much of the information as possible. There are a lot of videos, a lot of papers. So they can educate themselves, and it's very critical that they educate themselves on resilience. And I really thank you, NDP, and also the Sweet Bio for really giving this opportunity both for the participants and for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, some final announcements for our participants. Please remember to check out our website, www.nbsapforum.net, to receive the latest news regarding this webinar and the Introduction to Resilience for Development MOOC. There you will also find a PDF copy of the presentation and a link to the recording, which will be available on our YouTube channel. Stay tuned for our next sessions. For further information, please visit the NBSAP forum or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Also, please remember to register or update your profile and to complete the weekly lessons, which are required for you to receive your course certificate. If you have not finished lessons 2 and 3 yet, I encourage you to do so as briefly as possible. The NBSAP Forum is a global partnership to support the development and implementation of effective national biodiversity strategies and action plans. It is hosted by the Secretariat of Convention on Biological Diversity, the United Nations Development Program, and the United Nations Environment Program. I'm Marcela Torres, and on behalf of the NBSAP Forum, I hope you all enjoy this session. Have a great day or evening, and see you next week.